Thank you for listening to the South Dakota Network, a service of SDPB. Download the SDNet app to your mobile device and listen wherever you are.
And that direction takes you?
Yeah, I know that it's you.
All right, good morning, everyone. Welcome to the Thursday, May 28, 2026 South Dakota Department of Transportation Commission meeting. Before we call the meeting to order, got a quick housekeeping announcement. Tomorrow is Ron Rosenboom's last day of work. So,
Really?
retirement party on Monday, so congratulations.
Thank you.
It's exciting. Enjoy your summer. All right, with that, we'll call the meeting to order. Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Chris Brick.
Here.
Lynn Jensen.
Here.
Jeff Carm is not joining. Larry Nelson.
Here.
Don Roby.
Here.
Ron Rosenboom.
Here.
Rick Valerie.
Here.
Mike Valley.
Here.
Austin Simons.
Here. Thank you. Next on the agenda, consideration of conflicts of interest. Is there any commissioners in the room that would like to declare a conflict?
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
I've done the disclosure already, but, I wanna call attention to the fact that we have behind our building, but adjacent to the building of the, organization of which I'm the director, we've got an empty lot, and from time to time, entities use that lot to, store equipment, or in this case, it's paving, grindings, left over, and, bituminous, paving is the entity that's using the lot. There's no exchange of money, we just allow them to use it. So I just wanted to clear that. I would recuse myself from any, action that's taken on that
Okay.
item.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Okay, with that, we're gonna move on to the approval of the May 15th, 2026 meeting minutes. The chair would look for a motion or comments, changes.
Jensen moves to approve.
Jensen moves for approval.
I'll second.
Valley will second. Any discussion or changes? Hearing none, we have a motion on the table for approval of the minutes. Carrie, would you call the roll?
Brick.
Aye.
Jensen.
Aye.
Nelson.
Aye.
Roby.
Aye.
Rosenboom.
Aye.
Valerie.
Aye.
Valley.
Aye.
Simons.
Aye. Minutes are approved, thank you. Next on the agenda is public input. Is there anybody on the line that would like to address the commission? If so, please state your name and address the chair and we will recognize you. Hearing none, anybody in the room? Okay, with that, we will move on to the secretary's report by Joel Junk.
Good morning. Sorry I'm not able to join you here in person, but a couple items for you, starting with the federal side of the equation. The House Transportation and Infrastructure Committee, T&I, they did release their 5-year bipartisan surface transportation reauthorization bill on Sunday, May 17th. It's H.R. 8870. The bill has been named Building Unrivaled Infrastructure and Long-Term Development for Americans 250 Act, or the Build America 250 Act. The committee actually held a hearing on last Thursday, May 21st, where they heard hundreds of amendments that were filed and eventually acted upon that Thursday. Overall, the bill was adopted by a vote of 62-2, with 3 members not voting. I wanted to provide a few highlights of what's in some of the bills. So the big aspect is the overall funding. The bill will preserve the current federal aid highway program as structured under 23 U.S.C. 104. The bill proposes approximately 3.7% increase in funding with funding amounts as follows. $474 billion in the Highway Trust Fund Contract Authority, approximately $65 billion of general funds, and that'd be in the Rail Authority. Roughly 90%, though, of the Highway Trust Fund resources would be distributed by formula, which is great news for us. So the act would also establish a new federal annual registration fees to be collected by each state for electric vehicles and plug-in hybrid vehicles. What they've got in the bill is $130 for EVs and $35 for plug-in electric vehicles. And in 29, they are proposing that those fees would increase annually by $5, not to exceed $150 and $50 respectively. So that would be additional revenues that would come into the Highway Fund. They have not done anything like this in the past, if you recall. That was proposed, but it never did pass, and so we'll see where these things go. They're also in the T&I bill. There are no earmarks proposed in the bill, which there is allowable here now with IJA. The federal bill would also create a new Highway Trust Fund Bridge Formula program. So that would be formula as opposed to the discretionary that we work with right now. That would be funded at $9.2 billion per year. $200 million would be set aside for culverts and 20% for all system bridges. And that would increase from the 15% that's in IJA right now. And then 25% for localities via the state-held competitive, very similar to what we do with our program, the big fund. It also, if you recall, one of the subpots of money in IJA is the carbon reduction formula program. It would eliminate that subpot of money. So again, this action by the House is good news. It's a step in the process, and we hope that it would be on the floor here sooner or later. But as you know, the Senate still has to do their side. That would be coming through the EPW committee, and they have not announced a line for their version of their bill to come out yet. So, but at least, this is the first step. On the appropriations side, Wednesday, May 21st, the House Appropriations, Transportation, Housing, Urban Development Subcommittee, or THUD, they did release their 2027 bill relative to appropriations. They're looking at over $7 billion of advance appropriations, including $1 billion not yet obligated for the NEVI program, which was, again, the EV charging stations, and that would then be advanced into passenger rail, and those funds would be transferred into 27 as opposed to cutting the budget relative to the funding that's for those things. The bill was also drafted before the bill that I just talked about, the T9, or the bill America 250 Act was released, so they do not match, and so if anything, that would have to be aligned prior to any finalized bill on the appropriations, and the Bill 250 Act would be finalized here, hopefully. So we're anticipating that eventually those would be right-sized with each other. The last thing with that appropriations bill, it would redirect $7.9 billion that was set up under IJA, and instead of investing those funds in safety and strong freight movement, as well as more reliable travel for the traveling public. So we'll see where those things eventually might roll out into. I'll pause there, Mr. Chairman, just on the federal side, if there's any questions before I move over to a couple of the state things.
Commissioner Valley?
Mr. Secretary, could you just go over maybe the difference, if there is any, in what this bridge trust fund is, and how much money is there, and what that does for places like South Dakota?
So it would be designated for each state that receive formula programs. Overall, it would be $9.2 billion, and as I mentioned, those set aside. So we have something similar now, but this would in essence be memorializing that for the next 5 years. And we we need to spend a little more time on it to figure out exactly how much that might mean for South Dakota versus what we've received in the past, especially on the discretionary side. Mike, I don't know if you have any more detail on that, or we just need to kind of work more through on here and see what that language actually has in it. Mr. Beam, I'm assuming, is in the room.
Yes, the bill right now is about, well, it's well over 1,000 pages, so we're working our way through on it. We haven't completed every element of it, but we're working on it. It would appear to be an increase right now for bridge formula from where we're currently at, but we're trying to get the numbers ironed out on where that would be and what the set aside amounts would be. So give us a little bit of time. It's a dense read.
Thank you.
A lot of words in there, yeah. I'm gonna move over to the state side if there's no other questions on the federal, and I don't know if hopefully some of you have watched our news and communications that's out there, but I just wanted to bring this to your attention, and you know, we've talked about this in the past. For the last 13 years, the department has been involved in the PENN Network, which is Performance Excellence Network, which is a 3-state organization, and it's regionally looking at the Baldrige program, and this organization helps agencies such as ours that are keyed in on that to be able to enhance our organization when it's all said and done with. So as part of the process, organizations can submit applications to PENN, and then they actually come out and do a full review of the organization, and then they review that based on 7 different areas of criteria. They have an awards program that goes with this, and a part of that is 4 different levels based on how the scoring that they do. The bottom level is commitment and engagement and advancement, achievement, and then the top award is excellence. And we submitted our award about a year ago, and they came out here this spring, and we just received the 2025 Excellence Award designation, which again is the highest honor that is given by PENN. And this was the first time they've actually gave this award out to any organization since 2018. So again, the award follows a very rigorous year-long evaluation and looks at our practices from a management standpoint. It looks at our performance systems and helps us to identify strengths. Definitely looking at our opportunities, what they call OFIs, for areas of improvements, and really helping us drive long-term performance and excellence. One of the notes that the PENN CEO stated was South Dakota DOT has demonstrated a steadfast commitment to continuous process improvement and performance excellence through its journey, and it's very deserving of earning this Excellence Award honor. And we accepted that award on May 15th. Craig Smith has been a big part of this, and I thank him, but our entire executive team, as well as our employees, and their commitment is to pursue continuous improvement. And this award really recognizes our organization to help us get better and to commit to delivering safer, more reliable, and more efficient public transportation services for the citizens of South Dakota. So very proud of this award and very proud of our employees and our management that have done this, but I just wanted to relay that to you folks if you hadn't seen that. I do truly think that this should be an opportunity for our citizens and others to look at state government, and there are definitely areas such as this that are very great highlights that we should be celebrating. So wanted to bring that to your attention. My last update here is what you provide on an annual basis, which is the SDBG. Back in the day, it was called SCP payouts as part of Senate Bill 1 back in 15. You agreed that you would continue on to provide funding for the local governments and to help support their ongoing efforts for transportation. So we will be making those payments to the Class 1 cities, which is any city that is greater than 5,000 population, and all of 66 counties for these payouts. So total amount that state highway funds that will be going to these entities is just a little bit over $30 million. And so we'll make those payments here before the end of the fiscal year, July July 1. So again, those are going out, and as part of this, you agreed back here not too long ago that would we include pavement marking, what we used to be doing for that, so that's included in this. So, Mr. Chairman, that's my report, but I'll stand by if there's any further questions on the remainder of what we haven't talked about yet.
Secretary, I think you have one other announcement that you want to, no? Okay. No?
Okay, thank you, Joel, and congratulations to all you guys for receiving that award. That's pretty cool. Next on the agenda, Craig Smith, Director of Operations with construction change orders.
Right, good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission, Craig Smith, Director of Operations. I do have the two items, informational items on the agenda today. The first is the April construction change order report, attachment number 2. And you can see in that report, fairly short report this month, we had 6 CCOs that were either an increase or a decrease of $100,000. There were no CCOs that met that that were less than 100 or thousand that met the 25% threshold. So we're kind of in that transition where we're finishing up CCOs from last year's work, and as the work starts up this spring and this summer, we'll start seeing some of this year's projects likely on the future reports. So nothing real significant, I guess, that I was going to highlight, but would certainly take questions on any of the 6 CCOs on the report.
Commissioner Valley?
The last one, number 6, could you just give us a flavor of what kind of claims are brought up, like in this one, that's over $250,000, so.
Yeah. So no, good question. So by specifications, I mean, typically what happens on these CCOs that in the field, the contractor, if it's extra work or whatever it is, they're gonna work with our field staff to come up and negotiate what a fair cost is to perform that work. In some cases, like this one, they weren't able to come to that agreement, and so then the process is to bring that to our claims panel, and then both the contractor, the field office come in, talk through what the issue was, what the details were, compare it to what's in the contract, and then Secretary Junt, he chairs the claims panel and then makes that final determination. And so through that, obviously, we've got our legal office involved, come to that final agreement. We'll typically involve Federal Highway in that discussion as well to make sure it's gonna be eligible for federal participation. And then the language you see is generally what we're gonna have on the CCO. You know, once it goes through the claims panel, that number is the number that we put on the CCO.
Follow up?
So it's something that's in the contract then?
Correct. The CCO becomes the contract that for that item that was brought to the claims panel. In this case, the 287,000 is settlement of that issue, and that's what the language that goes on the CCO that both the department and then the contractor sign off on.
Okay.
Other questions? Okay. If not, thank you, Craig.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And we will have the last item too will be another informational item from operations on the incentive, disincentive presentation. So,
Thank you. Okay, at this point, would you like to
Yes. Thank you,
state
Mr.
what we
Chair.
would look for our motion?
We are asking for a motion to enter into executive session pursuant to SDCL 1-25-2 subsection 3, which is for the purpose of consulting with legal counsel about pending or proposed litigation or contractual matters.
Okay, should we look for motion? Nelson moves for approval.
Second.
Are you moving for approval, Commissioner Nelson?
Yes.
Okay, just checking. Just for the record, Commissioner Valley with the second. Carrie, would you call the roll?
Frick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Rosenboom?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Ballard?
Aye.
Simon?
Aye. Motion approved. We'll be back.
For those online, I will be putting the phones on mute until they return.
You are listening to South Dakota Public Broadcasting's live webcast service on the South Dakota Network. More information at sd.net. Thank you for listening to the South Dakota Network, a service of SDPB. Links to live events and their archives are available at sd.net. Thank you for listening to the South Dakota Network, a service of SDPB. Follow us on Twitter at SDNet for announcements about what's coming up. Thank you for listening to the South Dakota Network, a service of SDPB. Download the SDNet app to your mobile device and listen wherever you are.
For those online, they're just joining back into the room. For those in the room, the mics are live.
So when you said that, I was like, at least two, because, you know, she'll.
Wasted cooking there.
I didn't know where your jeans before he fixed that
Which
up.
jeans is that?
I made it slightly stronger.
You know, I always told
So,
people,
stuff that.
you know, one of the biggest bothers me is like going down, usually it's on the road and after the switch, yeah, that's a month, it's like a full water. That's the worst.
Any cheese on this coffee?
It's sponge, it
Yeah.
soaks in and squirts out all the dirt.
There are still.
Commissioner Roby, are you
More
online?
than culverts, but they're not very
He
cheese.
said he was calling back in.
And those sides of those, they don't stick up on the floor. We call it dip those. South and big culverts.
Yeah. I was looking for that.
Give him that.
Cross my ears is a good one. There's a tie. Put that up, hold it up, put a little bit of coat. One time you go.
Guy you were talking to, say,
I like that.
You go, you can see like that. And there was a guy out here or something, really nice.
Busy, he's not answering texts.
Mine's our where it doesn't let you ask. He's
Yeah.
run into that before.
74.
All right, I
You're
will,
being blasted.
yeah, absolutely.
We need a motion to come out.
No, we just need a declaration, which is
But it was short, I had to tie it really short because
You guys ready? Good. Okay, I will declare we are back out of executive session.
Don Roby back.
There he is.
Beautiful, nice timing.
Perfect time. Next on the agenda is Mike Beam, Director of Planning and Engineering.
Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. 2 items for consideration, bid awards by Mr. Wisegram, right-of-way items by Mr. Keys, and I'll come back to the informational STIP revisions. So I'll turn it over to Sam.
Morning, Sam.
Morning, Chairman, members of the commission. Sam Weisgram from the Project Development Office, here to present the bid results and recommendations for the May 20th and May 27th bid openings. I'd like to start with the May 20th bid opening, which is attachment 3A. The May 20th bid opening consisted of 10 contracts. Originally consisted of 11 contracts, but we did have to defer one of the jobs to a week later to a May 27th letting, so we ended up opening bids for 10 contracts. The low bids for those 10 contracts on May 20th totaled $8,096,000, which was $164,000 or 2% below the engineer's estimate of $8,260,000. We've completed our review of the bids and have 2 recommendations for you. The first recommendation is a grouped recommendation involving projects 1 through 5 and 7, 8, and 10. Projects 1, 5, 7, 8, and 10 were all within 10% of our estimate. Projects 2, I apologize, I made a mistake here. This recommendation involves projects 1 through 5, 7, 8, 10, and 11. So it also includes project 11. Projects 1, 5, 7, 8, and 10 were within 10% of our estimate. Projects 2, 3, 4, and 11 were more than 10% below our estimate. Based on a review of the bids, we are recommending approval of the award of contracts 1 through 5, 7, 8, 10, and 11.
Okay, thank you. The chair would entertain a motion.
Valley will so move approval.
Valley first for approval. Second. Rick will second. Is there any questions or comments? Okay, we have a motion for approval on the table. Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Frick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Rosenboom?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Valley?
Aye.
Simons?
Aye, motion carries. Thank you. Back to you, Mr. Weisman.
Thank you. The next recommendation is for project number 9. Reedy Construction was the low bidder of 3 bids for this project. Their bid was $783,622, which was approximately $184,000 or 30.7% above the engineer's estimate of $599,588. This project consisted of concrete pavement repair on US 12 near Faulkton. Through our review of the bid, we did not have any significant concerns that we identified with the individual bid pricing received. In consideration of the 3 bids received, we do feel the low bid is reasonable for the work being completed, and we are recommending approval of the award of this contract.
Okay, recommendations for approval. Chair will entertain a motion.
Jensen moves for approval.
Okay, Jensen's first. Do we have a second? Rick will second. Questions? Comments? Okay, we got a first and a second on the table for approval. Carrie, would you call the roll?
Frick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Rosenboom?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Valley?
Aye.
Simon?
Aye, motion carries. Thank you.
Thank you.
Back to you, Sam.
Yes, as I mentioned earlier, project 6, we did have to defer to the May 27th bid opening, so I'll move to that bid opening, which just consisted of the one job, which was number 6, originally slated for May 20th. So the May 27th letting is just this one project. BX Civil and Construction was the only bidder for this project. Their bid was $5,586,000, which is $219,000 or 3.8% below the engineer's estimate of $5,804,000. This project consisted of installing dynamic message boards at 16 locations throughout the Aberdeen and Mitchell regions. In consideration of the favorable low bid price, we are recommending approval of the award of this contract.
Just a quick question. Would you explain what the dynamic message board is?
Yeah, so there's, these are actually all new installations, so the big boards you see out there on certain areas, mainly on interstate, that just warn travelers of traffic and conditions on the roadway, yeah. These are new installations that were identified, primarily closer to the Sioux Falls area on the interstate, but there's also some on highways near, I believe there's some up near the Aberdeen region, and then some, there's a couple sites down by Yankton as well, so.
Commissioner Valley?
Who writes the scripts for these? Is that part of, the local people do that, in the regions, or?
I'll have to probably defer, if you don't mind, thanks,
Mr.
Gary.
Chairman, Craig Smith. Yeah, typically it's our field offices, just depending on what the condition, we've got some stock type, you're talking the messages actually.
Yeah.
Yeah, we've got some stock messages that Christina's office has in the manual, but a lot of times it's, done by the field office based on what the situation or conditions are that's trying to be addressed.
Is there a reason you think this one bidder?
Well, we did have quite a bit of interest in the job, and there was quite a bit of electrical work, as you can imagine. But then there was also some some widening along those segments and there's some guardrail installation. And there was a lot of traffic control involved in these high volume traffic locations, so I think there was actually quite a bit of subcontracting competition. And why there was only one prime bidder, I couldn't tell you for sure, but I do feel there was, from the feedback we were getting throughout the advertisement period, there was interest in the job, so.
One more question, on the messages, is that done remotely?
Yeah, yes, yeah, we've got an application on our computer, we can access all those boards remotely.
Cool. Any other questions? Okay, recommendation is for approval, the chair would entertain a motion.
So move. Approval.
Valerie first for approval, second.
Valley will second.
Valley will second, you guys are gonna try and confuse us here. Alright, we have a first and a second for approval, Carrie, would you call the roll?
Frick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Rosenboom?
I recuse myself from.
Oh. Okay.
Sorry about
Valerie?
Yeah, aye.
Valley?
Aye.
Simons?
Aye, motion carries, thank you.
Yeah.
Oh.
You said bituminous to us.
Yeah.
Clarity. That's why.
I did say by 2 minutes.
So just BX Civil, okay, we just correct that in a minute then. It's not bituminous then at all, then, correct?
I know I had 6. More.
Okay, we'll get that.
So it's BX Civil that you were recusing yourself from, so no Ron on that one, and everybody else voted aye.
Correct. Good housekeeping.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, John Keys, right away.
Good morning, John Keys, Right Away Program. I submitted my agenda. I wondered if anybody would show up with their lunch today, because I have a lot of items for you this morning. So.
We thought you were bringing lunch. I brought cookies, that was breakfast.
But I do have a number of items, so I have a total of seven different right-of-way items for your attention this morning, so. Getting into it, we'll start off with item number 1. This is attachment number 4, the right-of-way packet within your information. Item number 1, this is a request to transfer right-of-way to the city of Rapid City. Some background on this. This request pertains to a 2004 road transfer agreement between the city of Rapid and the DOT. Within this agreement, the city and the state agreed to transfer several highway segments from the state to the city. And there may be some familiarity with this because in June of last year, we brought to the commission a transfer request that encompasses the same segments, and there were parcels that were transferred. So I did note at the time though that there was gonna be more. What we had a year ago was what we had prepared. Basically, those parcels were on the shelf, so to speak, packaged up and ready to go. We had the legal descriptions, everything ready to be transferred. So we brought those to the commission in June of 2025, and those transfers were approved. So if approved for this one, this would complete the parcel list. We now have the remainder of those compiled within these road segments. So if approved, these would be transferred to the city per the terms of that 2004 road transfer agreement. With that, the recommendation and request for your consideration is for approval of a resolution to transfer the parcels as described within item number 1 exhibit to the city of Rapid City to complete the terms of the 2004 road transfer agreement number 612978.
Okay, chair would entertain a motion.
Jensen moves to approve.
Jensen's first for approval, is there a second? Frickel second, any questions? Gary, would you please call the roll?
Frick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Rosenboom?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Valley,
Aye.
Simons?
Aye, motion carries. Okay, back to you.
Item number two, another request to transfer right of way. This time, for this item is to the city of Sioux Falls. This is located south of Sioux Falls, at the intersection of South Dakota 115, which coming from Sioux Falls is also Minnesota Avenue, and 271st Street. The right of way that we were proposing to transfer, is actually part of a previous larger acquisition that includes excess property. The overall larger parcel was acquired in 2017. And within item number 3 exhibit, there's a plat of the right of way to be transferred. I wanna point this out because this also shows Lot A, if you look at that plat, which is the larger parcel that DOT had acquired in 2017. So the plat is the third page of item number 2. And within that plat's showing Lot H1. That's the portion that we're wanting to transfer to the city of Sioux Falls. But that's coming out of Lot A. So you can see Lot A there in the dashed line outlining that larger parcel. That's what we had acquired in 2017 in advance of the project. Lot A. That's excess property that we still intend to dispose of. This Lot H1 within that, we want to transfer that to the city of Sioux Falls as well. So Lot H1, if approved, this is a 17-foot strip of right-of-way, that would be transferred to the city of Sioux Falls. And what this would do, this would align the right-of-way to match up. If you look at the adjacent, on that same plat, you can see the right-of-way shown just east of that. The right-of-way is 50 feet, and this would align that portion of it so that it was a continuous 50-foot right-of-way strip there. Otherwise, we kinda have this little block out piece there. We want that to be consistent with the other right of way and transfer it to the city. So this request, is for approval of a resolution to transfer Lot H1 within Lot A as fully described in item number 2 to the city of Sioux Falls. And if approved, the city would accept ownership, jurisdiction, operational and maintenance responsibilities of Lot H1.
Okay. Recommendation is for approval, the chair will entertain a motion.
Valley also move.
Valley first for approval, second. Frickel second. Any questions? Ron's recusing himself, or stepping out, okay, would you call the roll, please, Carrie?
Frick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Valley?
Aye.
Simons?
Aye, motion carries, thank you. John?
Okay, moving on, so we're on to item 3, but, just to preface that, item 3 and 4 are related, so as I kinda give some background on item number 3, a lot of this is gonna pertain to item number 4 as well. But first with item number 3, this is another transfer request, this time to a transfer of right-of-way to Cottington County. So again, items 3 and 4, these are related, they're both associated with a previously canceled project. So this project dates back to the 1970s, when right-of-way was acquired for a roughly 13-mile segment. That would have been an extension of South Dakota 20. There's kind of a point at South Dakota 20 where it starts to head southeast to go through Florence and then into Watertown. But at that point where it takes that turn, this canceled project would have extended Highway 20 to the east to I-29. So the right-of-way was acquired for that project, like I say, in the 1970s, but the project was never built, and then was subsequently canceled. Another item here that may sound familiar to you, because we did previously bring an item to the commission last year for abandonment of a portion of this segment. The portion that was previously approved for abandonment, if you look at the first page of the overview map, it's not, the abandonment's not shown specifically on there, but it was the right-of-way that went from South Dakota 20 to where the first pin that says beginning. That was an 11-mile stretch, and action has already been taken on that. That right of way has been abandoned. Okay. Just providing that kind of as some background information, so. Of the 13 miles total, we've already taken action to abandon 11 miles of it. Prior to that abandonment action, we had reached out to Cottington County and the township to see if there was interest in taking more of that right of way through a transfer agreement. But the only interest was with Cottington County, and in fact, it was only for the 2 miles on the east end of it. That's why we've already abandoned the 11 miles on the west. So with that, that's why we abandoned the 11 miles, like I say, cause neither the county nor the township had interest in accepting that. Okay, so now we're dealing with the 2 miles on the east end. And to further complicate it, of that 2 miles, on the west end, I'm sorry, the 2 miles on the east end there, that the county was interested in accepting, they didn't want the full 150-foot right of way. They only wanted a right of way out to 100 feet of that 2 mile segment. So with that, we had acquired 150 feet, the county's willing to accept a transfer of 100 feet. We had to have that platted, so we had the 150 foot platted out to 100 feet to transfer to Cottington County. And that's what item number 3 here is now to transfer that 2 miles on the east end only out to 100 feet to Cottington County. So where item number 4 plays into this, just to give you some background before you discuss item 3, the additional 50 feet then that the county did not want to accept, we're gonna propose to abandon that additional feet, just like we had already done with the 11 miles on the west end. The portion the county didn't want on the east end, we're gonna abandon that additional 50 feet outside of the 100 feet that the county will accept. If all that makes sense. Okay, so to summarize, item number 3.
John, quick question.
Yep.
So that 50 feet that we're abandoning, that just goes to the landowners, correct?
So, it will go into private ownership, but in terms of who it goes to, we don't know who has the reversionary rights on that, so we file a resolution with the county, if approved, that the department's abandoning its interest, and then it's upon the county to determine who has those rights and who gets assigned that property.
Why would they not want the 150 feet? Why do they want 100?
You know, that's a good question. I think it's more consistent maybe with their right of way that they only want 100 feet. That's my best guess as to that. And again, the 11 miles on the other end, they didn't want any of it, so.
Okay. Any other questions? Okay, thank you.
Maybe just one.
Yeah, sure.
How much more of this highway do we have left for, is this it then?
This would be it. We
This will
do,
clean it up.
yeah, we do have excess property, that's not right of way, that we're dealing with as a separate action. We're not prepared with that today, but as far as the right of way that we're looking to either abandon, transfer, this would account for that entire 13 mile segment.
Okay, so
Again, except for any excess property.
So I make sure I do understand this, we're reverting this back to the previous owner, or is this gonna go up for sale?
It will not go up for sale, Chairman. We're just, basically the department is waving its hands and saying, we no longer have an interest in this.
Okay.
And in theory, it reverts back to whoever had the reversionary rights for when we acquired that. But we as a department don't determine that. The county will determine that.
Would be a disposal if you would sell it, correct?
Yes.
Instead of abandonment, yeah.
move approval for number 3.
What's that?
Move approval for number 3.
Okay. First for approval for item number 3.
Second.
Jensen will second. Any other questions? Carrie, call roll.
Fritz,
Aye.
Jensen,
Aye.
Nelson,
Aye.
Roby,
Aye.
Rosenbook,
Aye.
Valerie,
Aye.
Valley,
Hi,
Simon.
Aye, motion carries.
Okay, Item number 4, I guess as I had mentioned, we're requesting approval to abandon right-of-way in Cottington County. This proposed abandonment would be for that 50 feet beyond the 100 feet that Cottington County would accept. So item number 4, request approval to abandon 50 feet of right-of-way of the west, of the east 2 miles of canceled DOT project S2851, of which the proposed abandonment parcels are legally described within item number 4.
Recommendation is for approval for item number 4. Chair will entertain a motion.
Motion.
Rick will first for approval. Second. Rosenboom will second. Any questions? Carrie, would you call the roll?
Rick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Rosenboom?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Valley?
Aye.
Simon?
Aye. Motion carries.
Okay,
John?
item number 5, a request to vacate by resolution a permanent easement. This is located along South Dakota 25 in Clark County. Permanent easement was recently acquired for a project that's currently under construction. The project consists of grading, culverts, and interim surfacing work. So the acquisition of this permanent easement was specifically for the purpose of replacement of an existing culvert. Again, the work has already been completed. I wanna point that out, and there were no issues in acquiring this. But unbeknownst to us during the acquisition, there was the existence of a conservation easement with NRCS. The landowner was unaware or didn't acknowledge it, I guess, during the acquisition of the permanent easement, so we thought all was well. But after the fact, we find out otherwise, and in fact, there is a conservation easement on the property which requires a permanent easement. So there's a conflict there. Our permanent easement conflicts with the existing conservation easement. So now we wanna go back and vacate that permanent easement that we had acquired. The work that has taken place, that could have been done within a temporary easement. So the fact that that's been completed, I think we're okay there, but just going forward, if we maintain this permanent easement, they've acknowledged that we're gonna have to mitigate that, which the purpose for this, we don't feel that it's worth it, the time and expense to do that. So our solution is to vacate the permanent easement, which means in the future then, if we needed to go back in and do maintenance on this, we would have to acquire a temporary easement at that time. So we do lose that ability then to go in and maintain that as needed. We would just have to acquire a temporary easement to do that. And that can be handled differently than a permanent easement, which requires action from DC to get the permission of the permanent easement. The temporary easement can be handled locally through the state conservation office. So the request for your consideration for item number 5 is approval of a resolution to vacate the permanent easement as legally described in item number 5, and the permanent easement contains 313 square feet.
Would there be any issues getting a temporary easement in the future, you think?
No, we've been informed by the state office that there would not be an issue in the future.
Okay. Any other questions? Chair would entertain a motion.
Valley
Valley, I'll move.
Roby second.
Approval, Roby second. Any questions? Carrie, would you call the roll?
Rick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Rosenboom?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Valley?
Aye.
Simons?
Aye. Motion carries. John?
Okay, item number 6. This is gonna probably be a two-part action, I believe, by the commission here, so I probably should have structured this as 2 different items. So what item number 6 is, it's a request to dispose of 2 DOT properties. So maybe I'll just go through this and give a background and then approach it as kind of 2 different actions I think that the commission will need to take on this, but. The properties we are requesting for the disposal, these are located in Cottington County on the north side of Watertown. The property was acquired in 2003 for a project that was later canceled. Not to confused with item 3 and 4, which was also a canceled project in Cottington County. This is a different one. This was referred to as the North Bypass or the North Connector, I believe, which was intended to be a bypass on the north side of Watertown connecting I-29 and US 81 and then extending to the west to connect to South Dakota 20. Property rights had been acquired. The project was again later canceled. And some background on this, we've actually taken action on other property on this project previously. We've actually disposed of or sold of an adjacent property, which is gonna play into this discussion, which is why I'm mentioning that we've had a previous disposal on this, so. I think it would be helpful if item number 6, I guess, if you direct your attention to the second sheet, the second page, which is an aerial view and it shows the two properties in which we're requesting disposal for. This is lot B1 and lot B2. Lot B1, this is a very small parcel, 1/100th of an acre. And lot B2 is the remainder there of 2.91 acres. But if you look at the same aerial image that I think it's helpful to look at there, you'll see that there's a house right near the label of where it shows lot B1. That house is actually within a parcel that was referred to as lot A1, and that parcel has previously been disposed of by the department. We sold that some time ago. And at the time, there was an understanding that that property is serviced by a well. And indications at the time through survey were that the well was included within lot A1. But we find out years later through a subsequent survey that the well is actually outside of lot A1. So it's outside of the property that we sold, and it's in fact what we've platted here is lot B1. That's why that has been platted separately from B2. And again, the DOT had appraised and sold lot A1 with the assumption that the well was included. Understanding that now is not the case, that's why we're looking to transfer lot B1 or sell lot B1 to the adjoining owner, but at no value. So the reason for no value is that, again, we had it valued and sold based off the assumption that they did have the well. So we need to go back and make that right and deed lot B1 to lot A1, the current lot A1 owner. Lot B2, I guess, just to give some background on that before you discuss and take any action. Lot B2 is gonna follow the standard disposal process if approved, which would be at the appraised value. The appraised value of lot B2 is $12,200. So again, I think this is why we need to take this in separate actions here to first approve or to discuss, I guess, for your consideration, lot B1 disposal and then lot B2 separately. So if there's any questions, I'd be happy to take those.
Commissioners have any questions? We'll start with B1. John, would you give us our recommendation for that?
Yes, thank you. The first one is requesting a motion to authorize the secretary or his designee to execute all documents necessary to convey lot B1 as described in the plat attached to right-of-way item number 6 to the current abutting landowner of lot A1 at no cost. Conveyance at no cost is due to an error in the previous survey and sale of said lot A1 that failed to include the well, which is now within lot B1 within that previous sale.
Okay, thank you. Chair would entertain a motion.
Jensen moves
Jensen moves
to approve.
Second. Rosenbaum will second. Any questions for? Carrie, would you call the roll?
Frick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Rosenboom?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Valley?
Aye.
Simons?
Aye. Motion carries.
Okay, the second part of that then is requesting approval to dispose of lot B2. as described in the plat attached to right-of-way item number 6, and this would be in accordance with our standard procedures provided in SDCL 31-2-27. Again, with an appraised value of $12,200.
Mr. Jensen?
Just please remind me again, the disposal process, will this be up for auction or will it be private sale, or how will that be done?
So the first step of this would be to contact, in this case, the city of Watertown to see if there's interest in the property at the appraised value. So they would have an option to purchase at the appraised value. Otherwise, at that point, it would then go to public auction.
Any other questions? Okay, recommendation is for approval of track B2.
Valerie moves approval.
Valerie will move for approval. We have a first or a second?
Okay, Valley.
Oh, you're confusing us. That's what you're getting at. Valley will second. Carrie, would you call the roll, please?
Rick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Nelson? Roby?
Aye.
Rosenbaum?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Ally?
Aye.
Simon?
Aye. Motion carries.
Okay, item number 7. This is a request for approval of a resolution determining that the taking and damaging of real property interests in and to the property as described in the plat attached to right-of-way application number 7 is necessary for a public purpose and to authorize condemnation. The property, looking through the exhibit there, the property here is referred to as parcel 1 within the construction plans. This is on project number IM 0012306, PCN 08EJ. This is in Roberts County. This is located on I-29, just north of the South Dakota 15 Wilmot exit. This project consists of culvert repair, which was the purpose for this, is the purpose for this acquisition. The acquisition includes 62/100ths of an acre of permanent easement and 1/10 of an acre of temporary easement. That's all parcel 1, both the permanent easement of 62/100ths of an acre and the 1/10 of an acre of temporary easement. This parcel, the ownership of this is held mostly in trust. Over 96% of the ownership, and this is managed by BIA. We went through BIA and through that process of acquisition and have acquired the trust ownership, so we've actually acquired that 96+% already and have received a grant of right-of-way from the BIA for that portion. In addition to the Indian trust ownership portion though, there's approximately a 3.5% fee interest that is held in private ownership. And this 3.5% interest is what we have not been able to acquire. So this part is still out there, it's still pending. These fee ownerships are identified by the BIA on the title status report for the parcel, but there is no record of these with the county. There's no transfer history of these. The only thing that we're relying upon is the title status report from BIA. And as shown on the agenda, there are 4 separate ownerships, all with fractional interests in the parcel. Again, these 4 ownerships total approximately 3.5% of the overall ownership of parcel number 1. You know, in trying to acquire these, we believe that these fee interests date back decades, a long time, with no transfer of these interests anywhere on record, kind of like I mentioned, with the county. So we are continuing, you know, but we're nearing the end here and exhausting our efforts to try to acquire these. And in order to get clear title to this parcel, we feel condemnation is going to be necessary to work through those fee ownership interests. And condemnation is really likely going to be the only means to acquire these interests, really, because we can't locate the owners or their potential heirs to the property, to their interests. So I think our first assumption when we talk about condemnation may be that we have a disagreement with the landowner, and I wouldn't classify this or categorize that at all in this case. It's really just simply a process, the condemnation is a process for us to get an ownership interest that we haven't been able to. Any questions I'd be happy to answer.
Mr. Jensen?
So just to clarify, we're condemning in order to get a permanent easement and a temporary easement, and the property, when we're done, will go back to its original state. Fences will be in their normal and original places if there's fences there. The property can continue to be used like it was yesterday prior to this action.
Yes, that's correct. So, and that's our standard process. With a permanent easement, we're not gonna fence that out. The fence lines is gonna be maintained. It'll be new fence, but that'll be maintained on the existing right-of-way line. The acquisition here, the necessity of this is to get a permanent easement for future maintenance, for these culverts that do extend outside of the existing right-of-way. And as far as seeding and anything else, yes, after the work is completed there, seeding would be done just as we do.
Any other questions? Okay, recommendation is for approval for item number 7. Chair would entertain a motion.
Valley of Sumo.
Valley first for approval. Second. Rose, a normal second. Any other discussion? Hearing none, Carrie, would you please call the roll?
Frick?
Aye.
Jensen?
Aye.
Nelson?
Aye.
Roby?
Aye.
Rosenboom?
Aye.
Valerie?
Aye.
Valley?
Aye.
Simons?
Aye. Motion carries. Anything else, John?
Item number 8, that's
Yes.
next. Oh, I'm sorry, that's it.
Lunch? Next up, STIP revisions. Mr. Bean.
Good morning again, Mr. Chairman, members of the commission. Just 2 informational revisions for you this morning. First, which is dynamic message boards. Mr. Weisgram already chatted with you about that one a little bit. Cost increase on this one was mainly due to the number of boards. We were looking at 12 to begin with, ended up with 15, so ended up with 3 more. Also, I think Sam also mentioned that we got several of these going in the metro area. That changed our footing design, or design for the DMS board, so we got sign structures over now, so it increased the overall cost as we got through final design on those projects, or on that project. Number 16 is a project for area wide pipe work project. Mr. Keyes just mentioned PCN 08 EJ, same project. This project, when we looked at it originally, thought we'd have a little bit less work underneath with the pipe itself. Turns out we got some more work, so trying to correct up the costs associated with the work plan for those culverts and fixing that up. So those are the 2 informational items. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Okay, thank you.
All right, thank you.
We'll take a 5-minute break and then do the incentives and disincentives presentation. Everybody okay with that? Okay.
For those listening online, I will be putting phones on mute again.
You are listening to South Dakota Public Broadcasting's live webcast service on the South Dakota Network. More information at sd.net.
Phones are live again, just so you know.
All right, we will reconvene.
I'm Craig Smith, Director of Operations. Yeah, we have just the final informational item for operations. Ryan Johnson is our Senior Specification Engineer, is gonna talk about our different incentive, disincentive clauses. Often in our monthly construction change order report, there'll be CCOs that relate to the items that Ryan's gonna cover. So he'll go over some of those different types we have, why we have them, a little bit of history of DOT today, and then obviously answer any questions that you might have, so.
Go ahead, Ryan.
All right, thank you. Incentive, disincentive clauses in South Dakota DOT contracts. I've given this presentation, I know at least once to the commission, but it was a number of years ago. So this is a good refresher. We're gonna see some updated numbers of what the last 5 years we've done in the different clauses. I'll just kind of dive right into it, but we've got, I'll give a little background on what types that we use and why we use them. Specifically, the types that we'll cover is asphalt concrete mix quality, which is two parts to that. Is there's the air voids that make up the structure of the laboratory compacted mixture, and then there's the density, which is the how well it was compacted in the field. So there's two parts to that. First being the design of the structure of the pavement, and secondly, how well do you compact in the field. Then we've got asphalt concrete pavement smoothness, PCC pavement smoothness. A new item is relatively new to the DOT. We've only done this on a handful of bridges. Is the bridge deck approach smoothness. I think the last time I gave this presentation, that was in the very near future that we were gonna start doing that, and we've only done it on a handful of bridges, so. And then, one thing we did add here is contract time. There's a lot of times we add incentive, disincentive clauses to contract time provisions, which might be in the form of contractor, you have 15 working days to close down this exit ramp on an interstate. And we'll give you an incentive for each day you get it done earlier than that 15, or a disincentive for each day you get it done later. Or the overall completion of the project, the interim completion of a project. There's a lot of different ways in contract time that we use incentive and disincentive clauses. I'll get into that a little bit too. All right. So a little background on this. In general, our specifications define the general who, what, when, where, and why.
Commissioner Roby rejoining?
Go ahead, Commissioner Roby.
Rejoining the call.
Okay, thank you.
Our specifications define the general who, what, when, where, why, and how. The specifications are laid out for a particular material. The material specifications such as the placement, the timing, etc., are all very specific in nature, but they provide a range for the contractors. So say just the gradation of the aggregate on the 1/2 inch sieve, we provide a range from 52 to 63. Density of the asphalt, we say it's gotta be at least this up to 100%. So we provide a range that the contractors can operate it in. And that range is similar to if you were to buy a plane ticket from Denver to Houston, you could buy an economy class ticket, you could buy a business class ticket, or you could buy a first class ticket. They're all gonna get you from one airport to the next on the same flight. But your comfort of the flight is gonna be different. So that's similar to the range, and I'll use that a little bit later. By providing that range, we allow for more competition in our bidding. And as this body is very aware of, competition in bidding is very critical. We want lots of bidders, so we provide a range of results. We can allow more people to bid that project to provide that competition. By using incentives, we help to foster a bidding competition, also allowing for mini bidders. And by doing that, we can incentivize higher quality work or disincentivize lower quality work. And it also allows for innovation from the contractors. What can we do to make this better and earn more money? Next, we got some of the things that the South Dakota, I will say the DOT, but it's also the public, things that the state of South Dakota gets by using incentives is we get improved construction quality, we get enhanced contractor capabilities.
No, it's fine. I got 208 one time.
We get decreased maintenance by both the public on their own vehicles, and by the department in fixing potholes. And I'll use an example there. If you have a very rough road, you get kind of a cyclic loading from the shocks of a vehicle. And you'll see where there's a bump in the road, a few feet past that, there'll be a dip in the road. And those vehicles really pound on that. And the public maintenance that's wear and tear on your vehicle, and it also affects your gas mileage. On department maintenance, that's gonna end up being a spot that we have to repair. So if we can keep that bump out of the road, or a pothole out of the road, or any deficiency, we can maintain that road for a cheaper cost going forward. I'd mentioned that pothole example, that's usually caused by some sort of variability in the material, whether there's segregation or whether there's a spot that had less density or oil bleed through. There's a lot of different things that can cause that, but that's an example of something that would decrease the asset life. And then there's also when you have smooth pavements and we're not out there construction all the time, we get increased consumer satisfaction. And that's one of the things that we track on our customer satisfaction survey that the department does. We look at things like how smooth are the roads, what's the timing of construction, how frequently are we doing it. Those are all things that we track and care about, so these all lead into that. And then, of course, by using them with contract time is we foster shorter construction timeframes. Generally, work in the specification range will cost the contractor more time, effort, or dollars. So to get that extra smoothness or that extra density, they're gonna have to put a little bit more effort into their work. It's gonna cost them time and money. Similar to the flight example that I gave, a first class ticket is gonna cost you a little bit more. Some contractors, we believe, will plan on earning the incentive when completing their bid. So they might look at historically, they routinely make incentive on asphalt mix quality. They might add or take a little bit off of their bid to try to win the bid and then make that money up later. So in that case, we're getting that first class ticket at a little bit of a sale price by getting a contractor that shortens or lowers their bid just a little bit to earn the bid.
Let me ask a question. How do you price that incentive? Because if it's not done to the bottom of let's say it's just done at the bottom of where we allow it to be.
Yep.
We have costs in that we're gonna have, instead of that road lasting 40 years, it's only gonna last 25.
Yep.
And to fix that much earlier is gonna cost us a ton of money. So how do you figure in the incentive to get that extra 15 years? Or disincentive if we get a job that, yeah, it passes inspection, but damn, this isn't gonna last real long. Do you price that by that number, or is it less? I'm just trying to get a handle on that, because that's really important. Geez, we just did this road so, not that long ago, and some of them, God, we've had this road forever, and some people want to change it, but we still got 15 years left in this thing.
I hope I can answer at least part of that question. Federal Highway has some strict guidelines, and that's one of our financial partners in all of our construction. So what they say is that you can offer incentives up to 5% of the item. But if you offer the incentive, you have to have an equal and opposite disincentive. And that's where a lot of times our incentives and disincentives play together. They're very similar. The disincentive can be slightly larger than the incentive, in some cases it is, but the incentive cannot outweigh the disincentive. Now back to the 5% rule from Federal Highway. We could look at a roadway and look at the life cycle cost analysis and see the decrease in life expectancy of that pavement based on different specifications. But it's really hard to convey that to the contractor. So what we do is based on a percent adjustment based on their bid price. So I'll use asphalt for an example. There's for asphalt quality, mixed quality. We look at all the and I'll get a little bit into this with our slide here. So I'll apologize if there's going to be some repeat, but I want to answer your question. So we test it. We test it a lot, and we test all the different factors that we want to look at. And we test that out throughout the duration of the project, and we look at what's the variability of their results. We want it pretty consistent, and we want it within the range of things. We don't want them bouncing from the top to the bottom. We want it within the range and consistent. And if you can do that, then we'll offer you an incentive based on a percentage of your bid price. So that's where we would cap that incentive at about 5% of their bid price to stay within those limits of what Federal Highway does. The background of, do we get a life cycle improvement to that? Yes, we do. And that's the analysis that we would do in deciding whether or not we want to start using incentives. We've done that and recognized that in asphalt pavements, and our asphalt pavement lives have greatly increased. We used to probably, I don't want to speak out of turn here, but I would say 12 to 15 years after we paved a stretch of road, we would be going back in and resurfacing it. Now we've stretched that out more to 18 years. And Mike, is that about right?
Yeah, and maybe also on that too, RJ, the design that's out there, it may include incentive, disincentive, but that design is designed to give us that service life that we need, 20 years, 40 years, 15 years, 100 years for a structure. So everything's designed in accordance with that. And if the material, or we're not meeting specification on it, that's where that bottom one comes into play, with remove and replace. So we're not playing with a bandwidth of, boy, if they get incentive, we're getting 100 years out of it. If they get disincentive, we're getting 10 years out of it. The bandwidth is a lot narrower than that. And that's where the design comes into play. It says if we hit this design and we construct it in accordance with this, we're gonna get 20 years out of it. The disincentive, again, is more of a minutia component of it, RJ, but you're right, we've seen extended life on our asphalts to 18 years, and we have some that are more than 20 years old right now. And some of that's polymer modified, but I think a lot of it is just the incentive, disincentive component.
My second question, part of that, if I may, is that in the contract, or is that on all contracts?
The asphalt mix quality, the asphalt pavement smoothness, the large concrete paving projects, and some bridge projects, we put that incentive disincentive clause right in the contract. Some of it's built into our spec book, the asphalt mix quality one. the two pavement smoothness ones and the bridge pavement smoothness is moving into the spec book. It's currently in a special provision, but we include that up front in the contract. When the contractor is bidding it, they're bidding it knowing that that's the rules.
That they could get that
Yeah.
incentive.
Or they could get
Get
that
the
large
distance
disincentive too.
Okay.
Contract time, of course, that one's always bid in a special provision. Those are very project specific. And my office writes those for that particular project at that particular letting.
Thank you.
Back to the slide presentation, the asphalt concrete mix quality, that was the one I said is air voids and density. We use it on most large asphalt paving projects. I think the criteria that we go for that is anything over 10,000 tons. And it's always on the QCQA type mix. It's a type of mix that we use, but like I said, the results are based on laboratory tests for air voids and density. The maximum incentive is 5% of the unit price, and the maximum disincentive could be a deduct in the unit price, but on the very maximum range of that is they could have to remove and replace it. We just won't accept it if it's inferior to that extent. Why is density important? This ties back a little bit to our earlier conversation about the potholes and cyclic loading and things like that. There's a couple of different states, and this criteria is true for just about anybody that does this, so it fits us well. And you'll see there on both of these graphs, the left-hand side is the percent of service life, and the right-hand side is the decreasing density. So as your density of your mix goes down, your service life goes down. We're looking for that long service life. That's why our specs are built around the higher end of that range, to keep us up there at the 100% service life. And then as Mike had mentioned, the design mix that we put out there, the ranges that we provide is us knowing that we'll get that high service life. Next slide. We got some results from the asphalt mix quality test. So remember, this is the air voids from the lab mix and the density from the field compacted mix. Those are each a 50-50 factor of that incentive and disincentive component. So you look at the combination of all the projects that we've done this on, and you see it frequently in the CCO report, is the contractor earned an incentive for mix quality in accordance with the contract. This is the kind of summation of that from each of the last 5 years. So you can see there's some big dollars either way. Generally, we're getting very good.
There's quite a difference in 2022. Anything special about that?
I couldn't tell you for sure. If I remember right, 2022 was kind of a colder, wet year. And that would really affect the density.
So the weather affects the density. Gotcha.
It could. I mean, there's a lot of factors to it, but that's one thing that jumps out of my mind about 2022 was that we had quite a bit of moisture, and it was kind of a cooler year. And that will greatly affect this particular one. Next, we'll move into the pavement smoothness. We use a vehicle mounted profiler, and that has lasers and accelerometers in it that would track the distance, measures the distance from that bar on the bumper to the ground, measures that distance, and it also tracks the accelerometer of the vehicle of how it's moving through space. And as it measures that distance, it's gonna change, and there's a bunch of filters and some fancy things in there that Dave Huff from our department could probably explain a lot better than I could. I have ran this piece of equipment for a number of years back in one of my earlier jobs with the department, but it does some calculating in magic and figures out what is the total inches per mile and variation of that pavement. So if our road was as smooth as glass for miles and miles and miles, smooth as this tabletop, it would read 0 inches per mile. There's 0 deviations. But as we know, nothing's built perfectly smooth. So there's little variations in the road, and we add up those inches per mile to get a number. And then our incentive and disincentive is based on that result of inches per mile, and this International Roughness Index is what it's called. So we measure the smoothness of whether it's asphalt pavement, concrete pavement, or bridge decks. We measure it with this high-speed inertial profiler. And we use the International Roughness Index. And one thing we also track now is areas of localized roughness. So we used to just say if there was a 10th mile section that was above a certain number of IRI, you gotta go fix it. Now we can look at it is it this 20-foot piece? Is it that 50-foot piece or 500-foot piece? But if there's a certain piece of that that's rough, they go back and fix that. And you'll see that driving down the road, you'll see little grind spots where they've corrected some deviations there to improve the smoothness of the road. That grinding work is very expensive, so that's a big stick that the contractors don't wanna see, is they wanna stay away from grinding, so they'll do everything they can to keep that roadway smooth enough that they don't have to grind it. Pavement smoothness, I'd mentioned that we use that on large rural paving projects at least 3 miles in length. We do a defined dollar amount for incentive or disincentive for each 10th mile segment. So in that case, we don't really base it on their bid price because the bid price could be different based on the thickness of the roadway. I mean, there could be more dollars of mix in that 10th mile. So we just do a flat dollar amount. We adjust that every once in a while for inflation. But that's a defined dollar amount. In addition to the defined disincentive, there is corrective grinding. I mentioned that's a lot more expensive than any dollar amount that we could hold back, is to go out and hire new equipment that you didn't have on site and get it there. Last I knew, that equipment was probably around $1,000 an hour to operate. So that's a big disincentive. I like to stay away from that. Across the US, this map has changed quite a bit since 5 years ago when I gave this presentation. There's a lot more states that are using pavement smoothness. And the blue is that they use it for both I am having trouble reading this, it's right in front of me. Oh, it looks like the blue is if they offer both an incentive and a disincentive. And then green is that they just do corrections only. And the red is that they don't really have a spec for it. Anyway, map shows you that it's pretty widespread across the US. For asphalt pavement smoothness, this is just a graph showing the number of projects that we have profiled. I will point out that in the years of 2003, 4, 5, and 6, that was when I did that work. And then since then I've moved into this role, but other staff have continued to do this. We have some years that are up, some that are down, just depending on the type of work that we're doing. For asphalt pavement smoothness, that's probably one that you see also very frequently in the CCO report. This is the results over the last 5 years. Some big numbers either way. I can go back to any of that if somebody wants to look at it later. For concrete pavement smoothness projects, that's a little newer thing that we've just started doing. Back in 2015, there was one project. We don't do a ton of rural concrete paving projects in the state every year, but the ones that we do construct, we put the spec on it. So 5 is getting up there towards a lot of projects in a year. Probably average more around that 2 or 3. And for concrete pavement smoothness, here's the results over the last 5 years. Remember that this is not nearly as many projects as the asphalt, but there's still some incentive and disincentive earned on these. Yep.
How long after the project is done do you do the smoothness quality? Because I've been on a road where it's just done and it's great. The following year, darn, what in the hell happened here?
So
So what can you, is it the chunk that you take out and look at that you can tell of the roadway? Or how do you find that so that you know that, damn, it looks nice and it sure rode nice when we put it in, but it's failing?
I would assume that you're talking about an asphalt roadway that does that. Both asphalt and concrete roadways are profiled before the project is complete. And then that's when we base the incentive on, disincentive on it. On an asphalt roadway, after that first freeze thaw cycle, the ground moves a little bit and we'll see some of that. So we're a little bit, not a little bit, we are cognizant of that. And we'll look at on a roadway that does that a lot. Sometimes we're just putting a Band-Aid over it to get it through till we can reconstruct it. And in that case, we wouldn't probably put an incentive on it. There's no point in paying a bunch of money for it to be nice for a couple months. So there's some ground factors that come into that too, of what type of treatment we do and whether or not we'll put the money towards the incentive on it.
Follow up, so then do you make the base, if you think there's gonna be a ground problem, do you build deeper base in the original plan design?
I think it would depend a lot on what the condition is, like if we see it down here on the interstate south of here, there's faults that run through the ground. I don't think it matters how deep we dig out the road or how thick we make the granite material, that those fault lines are, we just can't stop Mother Nature. Now, if it's other areas where we've determined that it just has a little bit too thin of a base to it, yeah, we can thicken that up. We might do something like a process in place or take the asphalt off, blend it off-site with granite material, put it back on, thicken that up to try to gain some more strength there. It's really gonna depend on the situation or the conditions that we're trying to address.
Ron, I might just add, probably the biggest thing we do, and that's a good question, the biggest thing we do, you maybe drive through some of our grading projects where it's gravel or a blotter and it's pretty rough and not very good condition, you get complaints about that. The biggest reason we do that is carry it through that first winter when you get a lot of that movement, so we don't spend all the money on the smooth incentive just to have it move, so we'll carry through that winter, go through at least one freeze thaw, let the road settle out as much as it can, but unfortunately, with the winter and the freeze thaws, we do still see some movement after the fact. But probably the biggest thing we try to do is do the asphalt at least one winter after the grading project, and with some success, we do see quite a bit longer lasting smoothness on those roads.
Okay. Those were the results from the concrete pavement smoothness. And then the bridge deck and approach smoothness, that one I said was very new. You can see back in 22, we did it on 2 different bridges on the same project. In 23, we did 1 bridge, 24, 1 bridge, 25, 2 bridges on the same project. That one's much newer to us and we're still dipping our toes in that one. Contract time, that one I have also given a presentation in the past on the different types of contract time clauses that we use and all the different tools that we have in our toolbox. But when it comes to incentive, disincentive, they're more centered around the A plus B type bidding where there's the cost of the work plus the cost of the time. And I know when those projects come up in bid lettings and through the commission, there's sometimes questions about how that works. But that's the easy way of saying it is there's a cost of the construction work, the cost of all the bid items. That's what the contract is. The consideration for award is how many days did they bid at a dollar value per day that we set. The combination of those is what we consider for the award, but the contract value is of the construction work. That A plus B situation, after letting, so say we said it was $2,000 per day and they bid 110 days. That becomes their time provision. They have 110 days to complete that work. If they get it done in less than 110 days, then they earn an incentive rate at $2,000 per day. If it takes them more than 110 days to do it, then it's a disincentive at $2,000 per day. So it plays in both sides of it. It's for contract award, and then also that becomes their contract time requirement, and we would pay an incentive or charge a disincentive based on what happened after the project was done. That's A plus B. Lane rental and block rental are both very similar to that. They're different mechanism of how it works, but the concept of that and how it's awarded through the commission and treated at the end is the same. And then, of course, there's also time provisions where we just use straight incentive and disincentive clauses. Those are the examples that I gave before, where we say you have 15 days to close down this highway off-ramp or interstate off-ramp, or 90 days to complete this whole project. Those are all where we would say that's an incentive disincentive clause, and we put that on there. Another example, I'd said it for interim completion or fieldwork completion of the project. We want it done by a certain date. If you get it done early, we'll pay an incentive. If it's late, it's disincentive. That the use of it is based on some specific things that I and the bid letting office and the field office will all consider. And some of it is, what is the sequence of the construction? Is it something that allows for some speeding up? What is the traffic control situation of it? What does the area office want to do as far as what are they thinking for a completion date? Could it extend into the next year, but we pay an incentive to get it done in this year? That way it opens up to more bidders if we allow more time, but we'll incentivize the ones that could get it done quicker. And then, of course, the time frames available for construction. Sometimes we have late lettings and we just can't get the work done in this year, so it gets pushed into the next year, but we might want to get it done before the rally. That's an example of a time that we'll do that. We also frequently specify it only as a disincentive. Sometimes those situations are such that they can't really speed it up, but they can run late. I mean, everybody can be late, but you can't really be early. So in those cases, we'll just specify a disincentive. And as I'd mentioned back at the beginning, Federal Highway allows us to offer an incentive if we have an equal and opposite disincentive, or we can just have a disincentive. So there is times that we just use disincentives. Don't offer the carrot, we just show them the stick. So that happens. And then when we use incentive and disincentive in the sense of contract time, it's based on a calculation that my office does on the road user cost. So we'll look at how many vehicles are traveling down that roadway. What is the speed of that those vehicles, posted speed limit under normal conditions? And then if it's construction and we're detouring it off and you got a detour over 5 miles and down 10 miles and 5 miles back, that's quite a bit of distance to go around that project. So there's a calculation that takes count all those vehicles and the distance that they travel and the speed that they travel. There's two factors to that. There's the operating cost of the vehicle and then also the occupant's time. Everybody's time is worth money, so those are both factored into that. And we use that road user cost to calculate incentives and disincentives when it comes to contract time. Results from that, and I'll tell you up front, these are all over the board, and there's a couple of different reasons why. Sometimes we offer an incentive and a disincentive for an interim completion, and then another incentive disincentive for fieldwork completion, and that project spans 2 years. So a contractor may choose to do more of the work from the second year and the first year, take that disincentive hit there, and then earn an incentive on the back end. So even though this shows it by year, some projects are spread across 2 years, and they may enter an incentive on one part and a disincentive on the other, or vice versa. And we use them a lot, so you see that in your report frequently, that we have paid an incentive for timely completion of the project, or a disincentive for the contractor not completing the project on time. I think that's typically the wording that I use for that. Those numbers are kind of all over. Yeah. But both ways too. I mean, every year there's incentives and disincentives, and kinda equal out, but. That's all I had, so I got time, I can stick around for questions. If we wanna end this, I can still stick around and answer more personal questions.
How do you determine, whether there's a weather event and it doesn't work into the disincentive on the time frame? It's been raining continually for 4 days.
Yep.
I mean, it's not just a mist, it's just raining. How do you put that in? And then how do you make that determination if it's just a mist or, but I can't have any water falling if I'm doing this part of my construction. Is that a local decision?
It is local, it's a complicated process, but we put in our, specifications, right now it's in special provision for contract time or scheduling. And it's going to the spec book, so there's a table in the spec book that shows you for each zone of the state. And those zones are somewhat geographic and somewhat soil conditions. For each zone of the state, each month of the year, what can you expect for adverse weather days? And the contractor is required to submit a schedule at the beginning of the project. And that schedule has to account for the expected adverse weather days. And then as they do their schedule updates monthly, they look at, I planned for 4 adverse weather days, I experienced 6. It delayed me by 2 days to the controlling items or the critical path of the schedule of the project. If that's shown in their schedule and we agree to that case on a monthly basis, we'll give them 2 additional days. Sometimes that means an extension to the date that triggers the incentive disincentive. Sometimes it doesn't, and the times that it doesn't is, I'll use an example, is the Sturgis motorcycle rally. If it rains all of July, they don't push the rally back. So in that case, we'll forgive that disincentive, but we're not gonna offer that incentive because we didn't get that benefit of that roadway being open. We'll forgive the negatives, but we're not gonna then give you more incentive. So, sorry, it is a complicated process. There's a lot of steps to it.
And that's in the contract,
Yep.
that doesn't become up into like the question I had quite a bit earlier was, what was this, we didn't agree on and then we came to a
Yeah.
quarter of a middle.
Yeah, that,
$1 million settlement.
it could happen that way too when it comes to, contract time and weather. If we really don't agree with their calculations for weather or what they experienced, we can deny that and the contractor can request to submit a claim and it go to the claim panel and we might look at it. And sometimes the area, they do things within their processes and do it right, and we might look at extenuating circumstances when it comes to the claim panel and grant time, but it's always within the accordance with the contract.
With those extenuating circumstances, would they be, like fuel cost, what's happened to fuel costs, in the last couple months?
We offer a fuel price adjustment clause. It's optional for the contractors to take that option. But what we'll do is, we track fuel prices, we do it all the time, it's not by project, we just do it all the time. There's a base fuel index at the time that the project's let. And then at the time they're doing work, there's the current fuel index and we compare them to, and if they exceed by if the current fuel index is either 15% higher or 15% lower than the base at the time of the letting, then that's when that fuel adjustment kicks in. But it's optional for the contractor to participate in that. And they gotta, when they submit and sign up for that, they gotta tell us how much fuel they're anticipated to use. So it's all based on that. How much and what type.
You had the maps up there earlier across the nation of the different states that participated in things right there.
Yep.
Is there, among those blue colored states, is there a network of other people that are working on Well, the same thing, I mean, is there a cross-pollination of ideas and things that have worked, or best practices, or anything like that that comes out of that network of states?
There is, in any specification, there's states that are communicating with each other all the time. I'm part of a group of specifications engineers from each state, and once a month we meet for an hour and a half and talk about a certain topic. And we continually email each other, hey, I've had a question about this item, does anybody have an example spec and use this? We share ideas all the time. I will speak specifically to pavement smoothness. Back in those early years of that, when I was in that role, we made some improvements to our spec to make our incentives based on the number of opportunities that the contractor has to improve the smoothness. So like milling the old roadway off, that's an opportunity. Paving a bottom lift, that's an opportunity to make it smoother, and paving a top lift, that's an opportunity to make it smoother. So that's 3 opportunities. That scale for incentive is based on those 3 opportunities. Then we have a separate scale for 2 opportunities or 1 opportunity. And a 1 opportunity would be with that example that I was talking about. We don't do a lot. It's just putting a lift on top and not trying to improve that base hill. That concept was ours. I mean, that was something we came up with, South Dakota DOT. And at that time, when I was in that role, I got calls or emails weekly from other states wanting an example of our spec. And that, I haven't looked at every other state spec, but I think that that's pretty common to have that opportunity-based incentive. So that there is a lot of talking among states and sharing.
I want to thank you for having the bridge approach incentive in there. I probably get more questions. Why in the heck, and a little stronger than that, can't you guys figure out how to, I says, well, the bridge has got a base way down deep, and I says the road doesn't have one that's however many feet it is that we put the cement over the water.
Yep.
Oh. So is there, I know we've got some of these things where it can move up and down. What are you finding to fix that, and how can you incentivize that better? 'Cause I can remember some that were just done and I'm going, dadgum, it's back.
Yeah. The approach settlement issue or bridge, I mean, that's kind of a debate amongst a lot of people in the department. If you talk to a structures guy, they'll tell you the structure never ever moves. It's the road's fault. If you talk to the road guy, they say, we built the road smooth, but your bridge expands and contracts, and that's affecting our approach pavement. So that's a long-term debate. But we are making, it's a constant effort amongst us to try to improve that settlement issue at the approaches. We provide good, solid foundations for our structures. We put expansion joints in, that's the finger joint that you're talking. That typically works in this direction more. We hope it's not moving this direction, but we try to find ways to account for that. Unfortunately, South Dakota can be pretty brutal at times with the temperature swings, so that's a battle that we fight.
I mean, that is the reason we started the bridge. Brian said we just started to make sure the one thing we can control at construction, at least it isn't built in originally. It's like you say, it's tough to control those movements, but that bridge specification was put in, at least we know we're building it as smooth as we can with the original construction, and then we're doing other things with the bridge and geotech office trying to find better methods to address the bridge bump. But
Questions? Thank you, Ryan.
All right, thank you.
Hey, is there anything else?
Sure.
Yes, sir.
Just one question for probably Mike. Information, a week or 2 ago, we had a major traffic accident on a bridge in western South Dakota that closed down I-90 for a while, and there was fire on the bridge. Where are we at? What's happening? How do we address that?
Yeah, great question. Those instances come up, whether it's a fire on the bridge like you're talking about, this, I-90, China River crossing, down there by Wasta. When they come up, we immediately have our operations team, maintenance staff, go out there to help to control the situation. And then we call in our region bridge specialists to go out there and do an immediate review of what occurred out there. And whether or not we have structural concerns associated with it. My recollection is we left that bridge closed essentially for the day as we got things cleaned up. Our structure engineer went out there, took a look, coordinated back with our bridge office, and based upon the incident that occurred, felt it was safe to open up the structure. We got some diaphragm issues that we just need to clean up and get some work done with the girders and everything appeared to be okay. The fire itself, from what I understand, that got underneath was a relatively small fire, brush fire that got in there, so relatively minimal damage, but there was fire on top of the structure itself. When I initially saw the pictures of it, I was obviously concerned for the driver too, but my understanding is the driver made it out with no injuries, so just a miracle essentially when it comes down to it. But that's the status we have on that once the structure's up and going right now. We're going to have some barrier work to do for some repairs, things of that nature for the structure. So that's fine. Talking to the chief bridge engineer on it, it didn't even get hot enough to blister any paint on the girder, so it was relatively isolated away from the structure. But definitely something we're concerned about if anything like that were to ever happen. Our team was on it immediately. Craig, did I miss anything on that?
Yeah, what I heard the biggest challenge was the cleanup on it. I think that's what took so long. There's a lot of soot after the fire on the bridge. That we wanted to get cleaned up and pull it and back up, and that took a little longer.
Yep. Anybody got anything else?
Just a question or a statement, I don't know, we got that excellence and award, and that's really the staff that got that. Is that, placed on the DOT website, or will there be some press on it?
There will be. I do know, we've been talking, I think at our next executive team meeting in a couple of weeks, we're gonna try to do some type of celebration. We'll probably be planning that, and I would expect we'll send some information out that through Terry to the commission as well, make sure to know that. I think when Joel gets back here next week early, we're gonna get that. I think in a couple of weeks, we're planning to do some type of celebration announcement. Yeah. No, it was a big, a lot of staff effort in that, so appreciate it.
Get the news out.
Okay. Anybody got anything else? If not, we are adjourned. Thank you.
Okay, so here's all the right.
Yeah, you do.
Thank you for listening to the South Dakota Network, a service of South Dakota Public Broadcasting. Links to live events and their archives are available at sd.net. You are listening to South Dakota Public Broadcasting's live webcast service on the South Dakota Network. More information at sd.net. Thank you for listening to the South Dakota Network, a service of SDPB. Links to live events and their archives are available at sd.net. Thank you for listening to the South Dakota Network, a service of SDPB. Follow us on Twitter at SDNet for announcements about what's coming up. Thank you for listening to the South Dakota Network, a service of SDPB. Download the SDNet app to your mobile device and listen wherever you are.